I built a snowman. That's all I did. But in my neighborhood, that was enough to set off HOA Karen, the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association. She slapped me with a $10,000 fine, claiming my snowman broke the rules. But this wasn't about snow. It was about power, race, and control. What she didn't know? I wasn't backing down. And by the time I was done, the whole neighborhood would see her for who she really was. The snow crunched under my boots as I rolled the second ball into place. It was a biting December afternoon in our quiet little suburb just outside Amsterdam, Kamerling Onneslaan, a street lined with tidy brick houses, skeletal trees, and a thin blanket of frost that glittered under the pale sun. I'd lived here for 6 years, the only black homeowner in a sea of white faces, and I'd grown used to the sidelong glances, the tight smiles, the whispers that trailed me like shadows. But today was for joy. I'd woken up to a rare snowfall, the kind that transforms even this orderly Dutch neighborhood into something magical, and I decided to lean into it. A snowman. Nothing fancy, just 3 stacked spheres, a carrot nose, and 2 mismatched stones for eyes. I even gave him a lopsided grin, because why not? The holidays were close and I needed a win. I was dusting the snow off my gloves, admiring my handiwork, when I heard the sharp clack of heels on pavement. My stomach sank before I even turned around. It was her, Karen Vandermeer, the self-appointed queen of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association. Everyone called her HOA Karen behind her back, but to her face it was all Mrs. Vandermeer and forced politeness. She marched toward me, her blonde bob bouncing with every step, her lips pursed into a thin, judgmental line. She was bundled in a pristine white coat, looking like she'd just stepped out of a catalog, and she carried a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice clipped and dripping with that fake civility she loved to wield. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I straightened up, brushing snow off my jacket. "Building a snowman, Karen. It's winter. People do that." Her eyes narrowed, and she scribbled something on her clipboard. "It's Mrs. Vandermeer to you, and this," she gestured at my snowman like it was a pile of trash, "this is a violation of HOA regulations. Section 12, paragraph 3. No unauthorized structures on front lawns." I blinked, then laughed, a short, incredulous burst that fogged the air. "It's a snowman, not a shed. It's not even permanent." "It's a structure," she snapped, her Dutch accent sharpening the edges of her words. "And it's unsightly. You'll need to remove it immediately, or I'll have no choice but to issue a fine." I crossed my arms, the cold seeping through my coat now. "A fine? For a snowman?" 10,000 euros, she said, not even flinching. "Payable within 30 days, or we escalate it to legal action." 10,000 euros for a snowman. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but her face was stone-cold serious. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about the snowman. It never was. This was just the latest move in a game she'd been playing since the day I moved in. The complaints about my overgrown lawn, it wasn't. The anonymous reports about my music being too loud. It was jazz at noon. The way she'd linger outside my house during her inspections, peering through my windows like she owned the place. Subtle, always subtle, but I knew what it was. I'd known for years. I took a deep breath, the icy air stinging my lungs. "I'm not paying that, and I'm not taking it down." Her smile was thin, venomous. "Then I'll see you at the next HOA meeting, Mr. Jackson. Don't say I didn't warn you." She turned on her heel and strode off, leaving me standing there, the snowman's goofy grin suddenly feeling like a middle finger aimed right at her retreating back. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fine was ridiculous, unenforceable probably, but it wasn't the money that kept me up. It was the weight of it all. 6 years of swallowing it down, of pretending I didn't notice the way some neighbors avoided eye contact, or how Karen's rules always seemed to apply harder to me. I'd moved to the Netherlands from the US for a fresh start, a tech job, a quiet life. But racism doesn't care about borders. It just changes accents. By morning, I'd made up my mind. This wasn't about a snowman anymore. This was about her and me and every quiet dig I'd let slide. I wasn't paying her damn fine. I was fighting back. The first step was understanding the battlefield. I pulled out the HOA handbook, 50 pages of mind-numbing rules, and scoured it. Section 12, paragraph 3 was real, but vague. No structures may be erected on front lawns without prior approval. A snowman wasn't a structure by any sane definition, but Karen had a knack for twisting words into knots. I needed more than logic, though. I needed leverage. So I started digging. Karen Meer wasn't just some busybody with too much time. She was a real estate agent with a reputation for maintaining property values. I'd heard rumors over the years, how she'd pressured an elderly couple to sell their house cheap, how she'd vetoed a mixed-race family trying to buy on our street. Nothing concrete, just whispers. But whispers have roots, and I intended to find them. I started with the neighbors. Most of them kept their heads down, typical Dutch reserve, but a few were willing to talk. There was Peter, the retired teacher across the street, who admitted Karen had fined him €500 for a birdhouse last year. "She's a control freak," he muttered over coffee. "But no one fights her. Too much hassle." Then there was Lisbeth, the single mom 2 doors down, who hesitated before whispering, "She doesn't like outsiders. You know what I mean." Her eyes flicked to my skin, then away, ashamed. Outsiders. That's what I was to Karen. Not a neighbor, not a person, just a glitch in her perfect white suburb. The more I talked, the clearer the pattern got. Fines, threats, petty power plays, all aimed at anyone who didn't fit her mold. But I needed proof, not just stories. That's when I went online. Dutch real estate records are public if you know where to look, and Karen's name popped up everywhere. Property sales, HOA filings, even a defunct LLC tied to a shady development deal in Utrecht. Nothing illegal on its face, but the sheer volume raised red flags. Then I found it. A blog post from 2018 buried deep in a Google search. An old tenant of hers claimed she'd refused to return his deposit because he was Moroccan, citing damage he swore never happened. The post had no traction, no evidence, just one man's word. But it was a thread, and I started pulling. The blog post was a spark, not a fire, but it was enough to keep me going. I saved screenshots, jotted down names, and kept digging. Karen Meer wasn't just a petty tyrant. She was a calculated one. Her real estate dealings hinted at a bigger game, pushing out undesirables to keep Kamerling on Aslan, a certain kind of neighborhood. My kind didn't fit the picture. And that snowman? It was just her latest excuse to remind me. I needed allies. Peter and Lisbeth were a start, but they were scared. Years of Karen's reign had worn them down. So I went broader. I knocked on doors, braving the cold and the awkward silences. Most people shut me out with polite excuses. We don't get involved. But a few cracked open. There was Ahmed, a quiet Moroccan guy who'd moved in last year. He told me Karen had inspected his backyard 3 times in a month, claiming his kid's trampoline was a safety hazard. Then there was Sophie, a young artist who'd painted her mailbox purple. Karen fined her €200 for aesthetic non-compliance. Bit by bit, I collected stories, names, dates, a pattern of harassment, always cloaked in vague rules. But stories weren't enough. I needed something concrete, something Karen couldn't wiggle out of. That's when I remembered the HOA meeting she'd threatened me with. It was scheduled for next week, a public showdown where she'd try to bury me under that €10,000 fine. I decided to flip the script. If she wanted a fight, I'd bring one. The next few days were a blur of coffee and late nights. I turned my dining room into a war room. Papers scattered, laptop glowing, a map of the neighborhood pinned to the wall with red string connecting Karen's targets. Dramatic, sure, but it kept me focused. I filed a Freedom of Information request with the Gemeente, pulling every HOA document I could get my hands on. Most of it was dry. Budgets, meeting minutes. But then I struck gold. A 2022 complaint filed against Karen by a former board member, Jan de Vries. He'd accused her of rigging votes to stay in power and skimming dues for consulting fees to her own company. The Gemeente dismissed it for lack of evidence, but Jan's name was a lead. I tracked him down to a flat in Amsterdam Noord. He was a gruff, gray-haired man in his 60s, skeptical until I mentioned Karen. "That woman," he spat, lighting a cigarette. "She's a snake. Ran me off the board when I asked too many questions." He gave me copies of old emails, nothing damning, but they showed Karen strong-arming members into silence. It was a start. Back home, I kept rallying the troops. Ahmed agreed to speak up if I could protect Lau and his family from retaliation. Sophie offered to dig through her own fines for proof. Even Peter promised to back me if it came to a vote. But I knew Karen had loyalists, older residents who liked her iron fist. I needed an edge, something to tip the scales. That's when I called Noor, a friend from my tech days who'd pivoted to journalism at De Volkskrant. She was sharp, fearless, and loved a good underdog story. I pitched it over the phone. Suburban tyrant, racist undertones, a snowman as the spark. "Interested?" She laughed. "Send me everything you've got." The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a sterile room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. I walked in with my snowman still standing proud in my yard. Karen hadn't dared touch it yet. The room buzzed with tension. About 30 neighbors showed up, more than usual, drawn by whispers of a fight. Karen sat at the head table, clipboard in hand, her smile tight as a drum. She opened with her usual spiel, updates, dues, blah blah, then got to me. "Item 6, she said, voice syrupy with fake regret. "Mr. Jackson's unauthorized structure. The fine stands at €10,000 unless removed by midnight tomorrow." I stood up, heart pounding but steady. "I'd like to respond." Her eyes flickered, annoyed. "This isn't a debate, Mr. Jackson. It's my right under Section 8, open floor for affected parties." I'd memorized the damn handbook. She couldn't stop me. I laid it out, calmly, methodically. The snowman wasn't a structure. It was a decoration, like Christmas lights or a wreath. The fine was absurd, disproportionate, and part of a pattern. I named names, Ahmed, Sophia, Peter, each nodding as I spoke. I showed printouts of the HOA rules, highlighting their vagueness, then dropped John's emails on the table. "This isn't about order," I said, locking eyes with Karen. "It's about control, and it's about me being the only black man here." The room went dead silent. Karen's face flushed red. "That's slander," she hissed. I enforce rules equally. Then why's it always us? Ahmed cut in, standing. My kids can't play without you breathing down our necks. My mailbox wasn't hurting anyone, Sophie added, voice shaking but firm. Peter chimed in. She fined me for a birdhouse, but Hans's shed got a pass. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, doubt creeping in. Karen slammed her clipboard down. This is ridiculous! You're all finished? I said, cutting her off. I nodded to the back where Noor slipped in, notebook in hand. Because the press is here now, they've got questions. Noor's article hit the next morning. Snowman sparks suburban scandal. HOA head accused of bias and bullying. She'd interviewed me, Ahmed, Sophie, even John, weaving our stories into a damning portrait of Karen's reign. The piece didn't outright call her a racist, too legally dicey, but the subtext was loud. Online, it blew up. X lit up with hashed Snowman Gate, locals chiming in with their own Karen horror stories. By noon, the Gemeente announced an audit of the HOA's finances. Karen fought back, of course. Denials, threats, a teary Facebook post about unfair attacks. But the tide had turned. At the next meeting, a vote ousted her from the board, 18-12. She stormed out, vowing revenge, but her power was gone. The fine? Dropped. My snowman stood until it melted naturally, a quiet symbol of defiance. The neighborhood didn't transform overnight. Some still avoided me, and racism doesn't vanish with one win. But others, Peter, Lisbeth, Ahmed, started waving, stopping to chat. We formed a new board, one that actually listened. Noor's story got picked up internationally, sparking debates about subtle discrimination in progressive places like the Netherlands. As spring thawed the snow, I sat on my porch, watching kids play where my snowman once stood. Karen moved away. Sold her house at a loss, I heard. Good riddance. But I wondered, how many Karens were still out there, hiding behind rules and smiles? I'd won this round, but the fight wasn't over. It never is. Still, I smiled. Sometimes all it takes is a snowman to start cracking the ice.